Hello. This curriculum evaluation plan was for Decatur High Ability Academy, which is a small school, 117 students. It is all kiddos who are identified as gifted, top 5% in the school district for Decatur Township Schools. There are also a few kids that come from outside the district, but the school is specifically for high ability students. When I started this process, I was in a unique position because I'm the building principal, but I am brand new to my role and brand new to the district. So when I started this project, I hadn't even set foot in the school yet. I've never seen the teachers teach. I wasn't aware of what curriculums were used, what the instruction looked like. And initially, this seemed like a stumbling block for me. It made the project seem difficult. But in the end, I think it actually was a benefit because I went into this with a completely blank slate. I had no idea what I was going to find. I didn't know what I wanted to look for. I didn't know what the problems or issues might be. I didn't know the staff. And I think having a blank slate allowed me to do a really thorough evaluation of what happens at DHAA, and it allowed me to do it without having a clouded view. I think a lot of times when you work somewhere, you have some preconceived notions of what the issues are based on your own opinions, and I didn't have any opinions yet, which created a unique situation. So the questions that I started with when I looked at instruction at DHAA were, what does effective high ability teaching look like and how can it be defined? What does instruction currently look like at Decatur High Ability Academy? What are possible barriers to effective high ability teaching? And how can I remove barriers so that instruction best meets the needs of students? So this first research question, what does good high ability teaching look like and how can it be defined? So what does effective teaching really look like? Is more complex than I initially thought. As I started reading through the literature, there were multiple strategies and programs identified. There were some prepackaged things. There are different teaching strategies. There were different ideas, all identified as being effective. You could go down a rabbit hole forever looking at what specifically is effective with gifted kids. Even defining curriculum proved to be difficult because initially I thought, okay, am I just looking at instructional materials? Am I looking at planning and delivery, teacher and student interaction? Curriculum can mean different things to different people. And to me, I wanted to do a deep dive into instruction overall. I didn't want to just focus on materials. I wanted to really consider, what do teaching and learning look like in this building, and how can they be improved upon? In reality, I think the school has a really good foundation, and I think there are a lot of really creative, great things happening. That being said, any school can stand to improve instruction. Even the best of the best, we should always be looking to improve. And so having that growth mindset and going into this allowed me to really have kind of an open view of what we could do to improve. So thinking about curriculum and, what does that mean? I found an underlying theme when I read about all these multiple strategies, programs, and ideas. And this theme also came up in my interviews, and it's a general concept of creative pedagogy. And creative pedagogy can encompass a lot of different things. An article I read by Lee et al., this is in 2021, they defined, integrating creativity into the gifted classroom means giving students time to conduct investigations based on strengths and interests, using feedback to encourage creativity, building a school-wide culture of creativity. So a lot could fall under that umbrella: problem-based teaching, inquiry, projects, student ownership, all of those pieces fall under that term, creative pedagogy. You know, the last part of that article, when he talked about building a school-wide culture of creativity, that really struck me because I think that's a really tall order. But when I think about a school for high ability students, that's really how it should be. There should be a school-wide culture of creativity. So that stuck with me, and that became my definition for effective high ability teaching. I also came upon some interesting research about the school-wide enrichment model. And this is something that's been around since 1985, and it's widely accepted in high ability circles as being effective. But this movement, clear back in 1985, was fueled by a need for teachers to have the freedom to think creatively, thus providing creative opportunities to develop the talents of gifted students. So when you think about teacher creativity, and the freedom to think creatively, that sounds like a simple thing. Well, of course you have the freedom to think creatively, but that's not necessarily the case. When you think about some of the constraints that are put on schools and put on teachers, you know, you think about the legislature, you think about politics, you think about standardized testing, you think about administrative constraints, you think about scripted curriculums and pacing guides where everything has to be the same. There are a lot of things that can infringe upon the freedom to think creatively. And there's never been a greater need than now for high ability kids. So the research on school-wide enrichment just further fueled that creativity piece and my understanding of good gifted instruction. So the overwhelming answer to my first question is creative pedagogy, which can mean a lot of different things, but that's a good umbrella term. All right, so question number 2, what does instruction currently look like at Decatur High Ability Academy? This was another part of the project that was a little bit hard for me, and it was a question that was difficult to answer since I'd never stepped foot in the building. I had to lean heavily on my interviews, and I had to lean also on informal conversations that I had with district leadership about what instruction looked like. I did some background research on what was available as far as resources at the school. I had to rely on some of the advertising that had been put out as far as what is available at the school and what curriculums are used. So I wasn't really relying on my own knowledge for this part. I had to look at, you know, what information other people could give me. So what I learned was there is a concerted effort to accelerate math curriculum. Most students are working a grade level ahead, and the goal for them when they leave DHAA at the end of 6th grade is that they're ready for algebra. There are a lot of extra resources available for STEM, language arts, robotics, and specials. The use of those resources vary depending on teacher readiness and desire, student interests. So they are sometimes used a lot, sometimes not at all, but they are there. I did notice early on that there seems to be a STEM focus in the school. They have a robust robotics program. They have 2 technology hubs that are full of, you know, different machines, 3D printers, laser cutters. There's a lot of technology in the building. And so there really seems to be a focus on STEM. Their schedule, when I started looking at that, the first part of the day consisted of morning routines consistent with traditional elementary models. So they had 90 minutes of ELA, 80 minutes of mathematics. They had lunch and recess. There were some embedded specials time that everyone shared. And then there was a built-in PBL time as well. So those special classes, there were multiple different options. They had book studies, they had world languages, they had robotics offered during the day. There were a lot of different moving pieces to that. And to make that happen, all of the staff taught various courses during that specials time. That included administrators, support staff. I think the building secretary was even monitoring things at times. So it was kind of all hands on deck to make those specials happen. But that part of the day was very creative. District administration indicated that the general feeling was that in the morning, instruction was very traditional and teacher led. And then after lunch, for that 2 hours after lunch, that's when the creative teaching strategies were implemented. So that's when the students did projects, problem-based learning, specials. So all of those pieces came in the afternoon. This demonstrated to me that there's a clear effort to infuse creativity, at least in that afternoon portion of the day. So when I think about, now I've defined what effective high ability instruction looks like, and I've thought about what instruction at DHAA looks like. I started thinking about possible barriers. So why are we just seeing that implementation in the afternoon, and why is everything else so structured? What are barriers to that, and how can we help that to grow? And as I read literature and as I talked with people in interviews, there were a few things that came up repeatedly. One of them was a fear of risk taking, and the other one was a need for some professional learning. So, maybe they need to learn some new strategies, some new techniques, some new things to infuse into teaching. One person I interviewed talked about how you do what you know, and when things get uncomfortable, you're going to revert to what you know. And so if teacher is comfortable with traditional instruction, that's going to be where they go when there's discomfort. So it's interesting when I think about perfectionism and that fear of risk taking, I started asking some questions, and I found some interesting information out about my staff. So I asked my staff, how many of us were gifted kids ourselves? And I just did a show of hands, and it's, were you identified when you were a kid? Were you in the special program, right? Were you in the academic competition team? Did you have characteristics of giftedness when you were a kid, or do you have them now? And so when I asked these questions, 72% of my staff self-identify as gifted. Either they were identified as kids or they identify with those characteristics. And so when I think about that fear of risk taking, the perfectionism, the fear of failure, we see that in the gifted students a lot. They want a clear-cut answer to things. They don't like ambiguity. They don't like questions that don't have an answer. They're afraid of being wrong. They are perfectionistic. They have those oversensitivities, including emotional oversensitivities, physical oversensitivities. There are some very clear characteristics of giftedness that we see in the kids. So it tracks, that we would see some of those characteristics in gifted adults as well. And whether we're little kids or whether we're adults, giftedness is giftedness. And so the fear of risk taking and perfectionism, I think, is probably pretty strong among people who have those characteristics in their personality already. So it's just a little interesting sidebar that came out as I was working through this. But when I think about that piece of things, that social piece of things and that cultural piece of things, I'm going to have to put forth some extra effort, to help remove that fear. All right, so with the identification of the barriers and the work that I did looking at what effective instruction looks like and what's currently happening in the building, I identified a problem of practice that's really twofold. When I think about professional development and curriculum, there are some ways that I think we can address them. So the first piece of that problem of practice is that teachers are afraid to take risks and try new things. So there's that fear of failure and aversion to risk taking. And then the second piece of that is that there's a need for some professional development and learning around the use of creative pedagogy. So we need some authentic learning around that process. So the solution, when I think about professional development, is to develop a plan that will do some important things. It will create a culture of inquiry and collaboration. This will help people to feel safe to fail without the fear of judgment. And this is something that I work to instill in the kids, and I think the teachers work to instill in the kids, is that failure is a part of learning. And that's kind of a tough lesson, but we need to create a culture where asking questions and failing is a part of our learning. The second piece to that is that the plan needs to lead to authentic learning about creative pedagogy that will also give teachers ownership and encourage creativity. So the learning needs to happen, and then whatever we're doing needs to build that culture of inquiry and safety to fail. So there's two pieces to developing the plan that will address the problem of practice. Interestingly enough, our district goals are also in alignment with what I want to do with my staff. And, I learned about these goals at opening meetings after I'd already started on this project. And it's interesting to me that it does align. So Decatur Township is partnered with the National Institute for Excellence in Teaching, or NIET. And as a part of that partnership, they use the TAP rubric for teacher evaluation. And within the TAP rubric, there's a real focus on student ownership, student interaction and engagement. And so those pieces align well with what I'm wanting to do. The TAP rubric does. Another interesting thing about the TAP rubric is all research based. So if you've ever have a chance to look at NIET's work, they have the indicators in the rubric tied to research. So you can go and find their references for each indicator. So here are 15 research articles about why this is good teaching. And it's really interesting to kind of take a look at. The rubric really represents what we know works, which makes it a very effective evaluation tool. But aside from that, the district identified a couple of indicators that they want to focus on this year with the staff. So their goal for the 2024-2025 school year is to build academic excellence through higher level questioning to engage all students in standards aligned activities and materials. So the professional development plan that I'm putting in place, implementing creative pedagogy, will certainly lead to higher level questioning and engagement in activities and materials. So I think what we're doing will align well with district goals in addition to addressing the problem practice that I've identified. Okay, so this plan, initially I have to do some groundwork. I did some groundwork to try to create some structures that will encourage creativity before I could ever really begin professional development. So I changed their master schedule to allow more time to focus on creative instruction throughout the school day. So there are no labels anymore on the master schedule. There's no ELA and math. There's instructional time, and then there's specials when the students go to specific classes. So instructional time, I've tried to encourage the teachers, this can be whatever you want it to be. If you want to spend 50 minutes on ELA, you want to spend 40 minutes on math, and then later you want to do 20 more minutes on math, and you want to spend some time doing a PBL that addresses some of your ELA standards, all of those things are possible. Because our kids have all passed iRead, we don't have to adhere to 90 minutes of continuous ELA instruction. There's a loophole in the law for schools like ours where the kids have all passed. So we can have a little bit more flexibility with some of that instruction. And I think a lot of times, cross curricular activities, PBL, all of those things can hit standards from different content areas all in one. So you could be doing a science experiment and meeting ELA standards if the students are writing. So I'm encouraging teachers to think creatively about what that instruction could look like. And if I want to encourage that, I need to give them the structures to do it. So that was the reason for the changes in the schedule. I also took away the teachers having to teach specials. So everyone in the building was teaching specials to make that happen. Now we have 2 teachers that focus on specials. So the others have time to really, really focus on what happens for the rest of the time. I also ensured they had adequate planning time. I started the year with an opening meeting. So we've had a few weeks of school under our belt now. And I emphasized creativity in my opening meeting. I talked a lot about teaching students who are different and remembering your why. I modeled my own thinking about creativity when I told the teachers what my why I teach. And I talked about the kiddos who are the round peg in the square hole and they just don't fit and they're different, and how meeting the needs of the kids who are different is my purpose. And so we talked about that, and I tried to just model my own thinking to encourage that culture of creativity that I'm trying to build. Phase 1 of professional development, and this will actually start next week when we start our PD for the year. Phase 1 will take 4 to 6 weeks, I'm estimating, and this phase is really about building some background knowledge. I'm going to introduce some common vocabulary. I'm a big fan of UBD. So we're going to talk about acquisition, making meaning and transfer. We'll talk about depth of knowledge. We'll talk about standards and how we can look at the verbs in the standards and what is the standard really asking the student to be able to do. We'll talk about building skill versus content. We'll talk about all of those pieces that are important to have as background knowledge when you're thinking about teaching with creativity. I'll also use this time to familiarize the teachers with the action research process. So I'll introduce it. What is the process? What are the steps and how does it work? This phase really just builds common background, understanding, and interest. Phase 2, I'm planning on taking 10 to 12 weeks. And during phase 2, we're going to work together through the action research process. And I say we because my school is tiny. I have 5 teachers, myself, and then there's one person who works with social emotional learning, and she'll be with us part of the time. So at most, there will be 7 people that are a part of our professional learning community. So really, when you think about PLCs, our whole school is a PLC. When you think about instructional leadership teams, it's our whole staff. So when I say we're really going to learn together, and we're going to embrace this process together. So we will identify a problem of practice that we want to address as a school, and then we'll structure action research around that problem of practice. And then we'll work through the phases of research together. So when we're doing a literature review, it's going to be everyone bring back an article and let's talk about what you found. When we're implementing a strategy, everyone bring back student work. We're going to look at data and see what happened. What were the effects of this? We're going to do the analysis together, draw conclusions together. And this really is about learning the process and removing fear. So when we're all engaging in inquiry together, where there's no right or wrong answer, we don't know what we're going to find. That lack of clarity, I think, takes away some of the fear of being wrong when there's a chance that we're all wrong and it's okay to be wrong. And so this phase of working together is going to be about just building a culture of that being okay and learning the process. Phase 3 will come after phase 2, and it will take the rest of the year, and it might go beyond that. It really could be a framework for continued research over time. But I want teachers to identify their own individual problem of practice. And this should really be a passion project. This should be something they care deeply about, something they really want to know about, something they want to try with their kids, and something that's important to them. They're going to be working on this project individually, but we're going to meet every week and talk through it. So it may be an update where 3 teachers update us on their research and we talk through it together. And then the next week, the other 2 talk and we talk through it, or we all look at data together. It can look like a lot of different things, but it'll be a culture of we share every week what's happening and support each other. As conclusions are drawn with this research, the teachers will create a presentation of their research. So they're going to present their findings at the district level. The reason for this is it gives meaning to the research. It gives weight and importance. There's accountability. And really, research is most valuable when other people can learn from it. So the ability to present your findings is an important piece that I want to make sure we follow through with. Outcomes that I hope to see with this action research and this culture of inquiry is I really hope to find success in removing some of those barriers. So we're building a culture of inquiry, we're building a culture of creativity. And my hope is that that fear of risk taking, when everyone's engaging in the unknown together, that we'll build a collaborative, supportive environment. And that helps to address that perfectionism and the fear. So if we all don't know together, we don't know the answer, there's not a right or wrong, it takes away the fear of being wrong. As far as building understanding, by engaging in research together, teachers will experience an authentic learning process around the topic of their choosing. This aligns with adult learning theory and will lead to meaningful change. So those are my anticipated outcomes with this professional development project. In conclusion, we know some things just from our own background knowledge and working with teachers and in professional development. These are things I've learned over the years in my work and in my research and throughout the course of this project. We know that adults learn best when they see relevance in their learning and they can seek answers on their own. This is a basic part of adult learning theory. We know that engaging in action research builds agency in teachers and self-efficacy. We know that gifted students need creativity in their instruction for them to learn in a meaningful way. We know that the gifted possess characteristics that can make learning difficult. And no matter how old we are, gifted people are gifted people. After conducting this project, I really feel strongly, and I know that inquiry is the way forward for my students, for my staff, and for myself.